Final news story of the week, and wow, what can I say about this one? At the time of filming this, yesterday, Microsoft and indeed GSE Game World actually released a documentary war game, The Making of Stalker 2. First-hand account from the studio on the making of Stalker 2 in what is extraordinarily challenging circumstances. The documentary is kind of top and tailed by the game's first public reveal, which was at Gamescom 2023. But then we kind of go back and see the story of how things unfolded in the Ukraine as Stalker 2 was being developed. Alex, we've both watched this, and it's not pleasant to watch in some areas, but it's hugely instructional about the kind of challenges that were facing the developers here. Remarkable stuff.
Yeah, I think it is a well-produced documentary with enough footage from different times during development. It seems like they always had a camera running for a lot of it, which is interesting. Instead of it having to be reconstructed after the fact. And I found that very well done, well produced in that aspect. And just from the documentary is actually almost not about the making of Stalker 2. And I think that is better. It's better for it. They only really talk about the game Stalker 2 pretty briefly, about the idea of it kind of being representative of the ideals of what is happening in Ukraine, of just like a level of freedom and saying like what we are about. The game kind of emphasized that in its more freeform design. That's like the part where they kind of tie it back into the overall narrative. But most of the video is like about them showing the game off the first time, the journey to get there at all, and then a lot of retrospective actually about Stalker's meaning to Ukraine as a country, and its kind of like meaning as a game, and how it ties into the current war. And I think that is really compelling stuff. And I had not seen anyone from Ukraine talking about Stalker before, and to realize it is like a cultural touchstone for them. I think that's something I don't see being born in the West and raised in the West. And I had a very different experience with Stalker when I was younger. You know, I was super excited about it. I played it, but it wasn't something that I thought was like, you know, this massive cultural phenomenon. But for them, it is, and it was, and it's very important to them. And so they try to bring that into the sequel. And through the backdrop and actually it takes frontal stage in the video for most of the documentary, is the fact that they started producing the game and prepared making the game as the war was breaking out and the invasion was occurring. And the stories are not exactly easy to get through. So if you do watch this video, which I do recommend watching it, go into it with knowing the fact they're going to talk about things and they're going to show things that are actually disturbing. It's definitely not something you can go through really easily, I would say. That's for certain. But when they kind of get to the end of it and they talk about what the game means for them, I think there's just like this great full circle that they do, because they start off with like Gamescom showing and they come back to it at the end about, you know, just what the game means to them and the kind of their personal story while trying to make this game. It's incredible. And yeah, big props to the developers at GSC for even making the game. I think most places where a war would break out and the entire country's, you know, would be flipped on its head in terms of what your priorities are. The fact that they can even bring it out is pretty miraculous, actually. And I also want to just really praise the developers too for taking care of their people who work at the company. There's this kind of story in there about them all, like a lot of the developers leaving the country as the invasion started, which, wow. I mean, imagine as a workplace, you have to plan to move people's families in case of a war breaking out. And that's kind of what they had to do. And it's harrowing, and must have been ridiculous for them. So bravo.
There were a couple of moves, weren't there? There were a couple of moves for the studio. First of all, they moved to the west of the country, thinking that if they were within 50 miles of a NATO country, they wouldn't be receiving missiles, but then there were developers who didn't want to leave, who wanted to stay where they were. Other developers who joined the armed forces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's an astonishing series of human stories about this conflict, and the game is almost like obviously it's the thematic glue towards the whole documentary, but it's really about the people who are making the games and the challenges that they're facing there. And I think they moved first of all to the west of the Ukraine, but then they moved into Czech Republic.
Yeah.
It's like big culture shocks there. They didn't really know how to operate in the Czech Republic at all.
Yeah.
Astonishing stories.
Yeah, and all throughout it too, there's a lot of the people that stayed in Ukraine and some that joined the armed forces they're also interviewed there. But there's people working in Ukraine, still working on the game, and they show like little vignettes of like someone programming on their desk and then looking out the window as the air raid siren starts off and saying, "This is how I wake up every morning." Incredible stuff. So I'm going to be covering this game. In light of everything, though, it's not an easy coverage because I'm a little worried about games always coming out, especially in the modern day, especially an Unreal Engine game. I'll give it my best. I'll give it my all. I will be as clean as I always am about these kind of things. But in the back of my mind, I will realize this is a game that was made under ridiculous circumstances. So you have to keep that in mind. It's
interesting that that we actually cameoed in that documentary because there was a mixed reaction to that Gamescom 2023 gameplay demo. All I can really say is that the documentary is framed entirely within that context, that Gamescom context almost. So the stuff that we were saying about it in 2024 Gamescom, which was a lot more positive, it just doesn't really make the cut there, which is a shame. But
yeah, it is a shame. I hope people don't think I'm like a Stalker hater or something as a result of that. I don't even. Yeah, no, I'm a big Stalker fan actually. So, I just I think right now getting the game out, then getting a PlayStation version out, and also they mentioned in some interviews, I think that they're going to plan on adding in things like hardware ray tracing after release. Right now it's using software Lumen. So we already know that there's going to be some sort of iteration post-release. So It's not the complete article at launch here, at least in terms of their eventual goals. But Stalker wasn't either. That game's been patched a lot and it had so many, quasi sequels with the expansions, and some of them are standalone. So yeah, just incredible. I highly recommend everyone watch it.